Welcome to Healthy Mama Hacks, a weekly mini podcast where I share my best tips for hacking your healthy mama life with simple tips for easier eating, cooking, and living a healthy mama life in 20-ish minutes, about the time it takes you to fold a load of laundry. So let's do this, mama. Hey friend, welcome back to the Healthy Balanced Mama podcast. Today we are diving into week 3 of my Healthy Mama Hacks series on meal prep. 2 weeks ago, when I started the series, we talked about the 4 P's of meal prep. Plan your meals, prioritize your needs, plan your prep, and prep your meals. And what this is going to help you do is to start to figure out how you can create your own convenience through meal prep in a way that feels easy, that feels freeing, that is going to help you feel less burdened by meals throughout your week. And so that's what we talked about in that episode. And so if you haven't listened to that episode, I highly recommend. That's a great place to start. And then last week, we talked about how to prioritize your prep. How to ask yourself where you need the most support with your prep, how much time you have to prepare meals, how much time you have to prep. And so I gave you some questions to ask yourself and some examples of how to start to prioritize your prep in a way that works for you, instead of feeling like prep needs to look a certain way, that you need to spend a certain amount of time doing prep. Prep is about creating your own convenience. So that's what I really encourage you to do in last week's episode. And today, I want to talk about planning your prep and the order of operations. I am not talking about the order of operations in a mathematical sense, because I have zero qualifications to teach you anything about math. But for those of you who do understand what the order of operations means, it's a rule that tells you the right sequence of steps for performing a math equation. I hope I'm explaining that correctly. But this is exactly what we're doing when I'm giving you an order of operations when it comes to meal prep. Remember how I said that there's no one right way to meal prep? Well, that's very true. However, there is an order of operations that is going to make your meal prep easier and more efficient. So remember, the last couple of weeks, I shared with you the 4 P's of meal prep. We already talked about the importance of planning your meals. We talked about the importance of prioritizing your needs. When you go to actually do your prep, one of the steps that I see women skip the most, and it's one of the reasons why I have a whole video lesson on this in my meal prep course, is they forget to actually plan out what they're going to prep. And they go into prepping with absolutely no plan. And then it takes them way longer than it needs to because they are doing things out of order. So, and when I say they're doing things out of order, no one's probably ever told them a more efficient order to cook in the kitchen. And this is something that, I have learned from years of being in the culinary industry, especially my time as a personal chef, when people paid me hourly and they were going to be back home at a certain time. So I would come to their house in the morning with all of my equipment. I'd have to get my equipment out. I'd have to get all my groceries out. Usually I went grocery shopping first thing in the morning. I'd have to get everything out and start prepping right away before they got home. So I needed to be really efficient. And so I love talking about being more efficient in the kitchen. And this has nothing to do with culinary skills. Yes, learning more knife skills is going to help you to become more efficient in the kitchen. And I teach that in some way or another in every single one of my cooking classes. But the order of operations that you do things is what is going to help you be most efficient in the kitchen, especially when you're doing your meal prep. So today I'm going to give you the steps to meal prep with efficiency. And this works whatever meal prep style you are going to do. It's just going to change a little bit based on how much cooking you're actually going to do. I talked about the 3 meal prep styles in last week's episode, and I go into them in depth in my meal prep course. So I'm not going to go into them, but I will refer to them in this episode. They're ingredient prep, batch cooking, and combination prep, which is a combination of ingredient and batch cooking. So if you want to learn a little bit more about those, I talked about them in the last episode. But so I will refer to those. But for the most part, I just want to give you the steps to more efficient prep. I think this is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode, but I think it's going to be really, really helpful for you. So I can't wait to hear your feedback on this. Be sure to head over to Instagram at HealthyMamaChris and shoot me a DM if this is helpful. And definitely tag me in your pictures if you start meal prepping. And this makes things so much easier, because I promise you, if you use these steps, it will. So this is the order of operations when it comes to meal prepping with efficiency. There are five 5 steps that you need to do in order to meal prep with efficiency. Now, this is not including the things that I already talked about, which is planning your meals and prioritizing your needs. Once you know what meals you're going to cook, and then from those meals, what you're going to prep, you need to create some sort of a plan. And we will talk about that in just a second. But when you create your plan, you want to keep these things in mind. You want to know what you want to include in your plan and the order you want to plan things in. I know this sounds kind of complicated, but as I go through these, know that this is not complicated at all. This is like a scrap piece of paper with like a bunch of things listed on it that takes you like less than 5 minutes. But once you know how to write these things down, that's what's going to make your prep super efficient. So the first order of operations when you are about to get prepped, okay, remember, we already have our meal plan. We already know what we're going to prep. The first thing that you need to do is to clear your space. You need to take everything off of the counters. You need to take everything, like all of the paperwork from school and the bills and the toy cars and the Barbies and the fruit basket if it's taking up too much room. You need as much space to prep as possible. And I'm going to share when I talk more about mise en place and mise en place hacks next week, I'm going to share why you need extra space. But the most space you can have, the better. You do not want to crowd yourself into a tiny corner. This is going to be stressful and it's not going to give you enough room to be efficient. So number 1, clear your space. You can do this before or after you plan your prep, but this is the first order of operations, is you need to clear your space. The second thing that you need to do, remember, you already know what you're going to prep. We haven't figured out what order we're going to do it in, but you already know what you're going to prep. So you need to gather your equipment. So I want you to get out your equipment. So get out your cutting board. Make sure to secure your cutting board. That means a wet paper towel if you don't have like the little rubber things on it that keep it from moving around. So you want to get your cutting board. You want to get your knife or knives if you want to use more than one knife. You want to get out your Instant Pot if you're going to use your Instant Pot or your slow cooker. Make sure you keep those as far away from your prep space as you can, so they don't take up a ton of room. I know I have a pretty small kitchen, so there's not a ton of room for that. So I try and keep that in a different area. Hey mama, jumping in here for just a quick sec, because if you love this series on meal prep, you are going to love learning from me in person, sort of, in this month's online back-to-school meal prep class. In this hour-long meal prep adventure, you'll learn pro tips from me, a former personal chef and busy mama, on how to prep ahead for the week in just an hour, setting yourself up for an easier, healthier, and more delicious week. Best of all, you'll be learning live, which means you're not only watching me cook, you can also ask questions and interact with me. And you'll end class with a fully prepped breakfast, lunch, and snack, as well as ingredients for 4 days of dinners. Sounds pretty awesome, right? Head to healthymamakris.com/classes to join. Space is incredibly limited, so don't wait to grab your spot and join us. That's healthymamakris.com/classes to join me in my back-to-school meal prep class. Gather any bowls that you might need to put things in. And okay, this isn't a might. This is a definitely grab a ton of bowls to put the ingredients that you are prepping into. Get any pans you might need out. Okay, I want you to gather your equipment. And then I want you to wash your produce. So get out your food, your produce that you're going to prep, and I want you to wash it and set it to dry while you plan your prep. Or, again, you can either plan your prep first before you do these things, or you can do these things and then plan your prep. But I want you to wash your produce. So you're not washing as you go and going like back and forth from the sink to the counter, the sink to the counter. Just wash it all at once, dry it off, and then you're ready to go. So number 1, clear your space. Number 2, gather your equipment and wash your produce. And I just wrap those up together. And then here is where you need to know what you're actually prepping. You want to preheat your oven, okay? Knowing what time and temperature each one of your items, especially definitely the ones that you're going to cook. If you're not cooking, then if you're just doing ingredient prep and this doesn't involve any cooking for you, sometimes ingredient prep does, sometimes it doesn't. If you're doing cooking, then you want to know, you have your recipes, you have your meal plan, what temperature and how much time each one of the items is going to take. So you want to start by preheating your oven. Now here is where we start to plan our prep. It's important to know which item is going to take the longest. Okay, so which item that you are going to cook fully is going to take the longest? That is the first thing that you are going to write down on your list, okay? You're going to write down the oven temperature. You're going to preheat the oven to that temperature if you're putting it in the oven or whatever you need to preheat. What is going to take the longest? Not what item is going to take the longest during the week. What item is going to take the longest during your prep? If you're prepping for a slow cooker meal, that is not the first one you're putting on the list. This is what you're actually going to put on the stove or in the oven when you're going to do your prep. I just want to clarify that. So you're going to put that item first, the one that's going to take the next longest time next, and you're going to order them in that order. Make sure you leave a lot of space in between these. Okay. So you can't see me, but I am holding my fingers up and kind of blocking out. Okay. This is the first thing I'm going to cook. This is the second thing I'm going to cook. This is the third thing I'm going to cook, depending on how many items you're actually going to cook. That is what you're going to start by writing out is, okay, I'm going to cook these 3 dishes. And then underneath those 3 dishes, you are going to put what you need to prep ahead of time in order to get it cooking. Okay. This is your mise en place, which is step number 4. Okay. Mise en place is what I'm going to talk all about next week, but it's a French term that means everything in its place or set in place. This is the chef's secret to efficient cooking. You're getting everything ready before you even start cooking. So you're not chopping and throwing it in the pot and chopping and throwing it in the pot and chopping and throwing it in the pot. You are chopping everything and then boom, 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 one thing after another. Your dishes are going to take you half as much time when you get your meal prep down, when you get your mise en place down, which for ingredient prep is basically just mise en placing ahead of time. And I think I just turned mise en place into a verb. But you know what? We're going to do some mise en placing around here. So you want to preheat your oven, which means you need to know what temperature and how much time things are going to cook. You're going to put things in order of this is what's going to take the longest. And then underneath each one, you're going to put the items that you need to prepare ahead of time for each one of these. Now, I will put a template along with the printable show notes in the notes in the description box. You can click that, you can download it, and you can see a template of how this works. There is a sample one that has examples of how I would actually do this, and then one that you can fill out yourself. It's a printable, it's a freebie, so you can grab that and you can utilize that if you like a good printable, like I do. So that's what you're going to do. That is how you're going to plan your prep. That's it. And then anything at the bottom is just things that don't need to be cooked, but you still want to prep. And so you've already prioritized your prep before. This is what we talked about last week. So this is not absolutely everything in the entire week. These are the things that matter the most to you. And you've already prioritized. So these are the things you're going to get done during your prep in the time you have, because we've already figured that out. And now we're just giving ourselves an order to do things that's going to be more efficient. So where you're going to start is with mise en place for that first item that's going to take the longest. Now, I want you to make sure that you are glancing down and seeing if there are similar ingredients, because you are not going to chop one onion and one pepper for one recipe, cook it up, and then chop another onion and another pepper for another recipe and then cook that up. If you are chopping onions for one recipe and there are other onions in other recipes, you're chopping all the onions at once because it is way easier. Your cutting board already smells like onions. You're already crying all over the place. I hope not. If your knife is sharp and you know how to chop an onion, then you're not going to be crying all over the place. Maybe a few tears. I shed a few tears sometimes too. But that's a complete aside. You're going to do your mise en place for that specific meal. However, I do want you to double up if there are other ingredients, because that is going to make you so much more efficient. So just cross it out. So say we're going to use onions as an example. So there's an onion in the first meal and there's an onion in the second meal. You're just going to cross out the onion in the second meal and you're going to add another onion up to the prep you're doing in the first meal. Does that make sense? So you're going to chop a couple onions, you're going to chop your carrots, you're going to chop your celery, you're going to get all of that ready for the soup that you're going to make ahead of time, because Tuesdays are crazy and you want to have the soup ready to go that you can just heat up. Awesome. Or maybe you're prepping that stuff to put in the Instant Pot. Either way, you're going to do that prep first. Okay. You're gonna prep all of that stuff for the first recipe, get the first recipe going, and then move on to the next recipe, and so on and so forth. Doing your mise en place before you start to cook is going to be a game changer, and making sure that you are doubling up those ingredients so that you are getting all your onions done, all your carrots done, all your celery, all your peppers done. And then step 5 is to cook the longest item first. The reason why you're cooking the longest item first, the reason why you're doing the mise en place for that item specifically, plus doubling up any other ingredients that you might have on your list, you're getting the mise en place done for that, because then you can get all the other stuff done while that item is cooking. You're not like doing all of your prep and then starting to cook. That's crazy town, and that's going to take you so much longer. So get all the mise en place done for the item that is going to take you the longest, get that cooking, and then while that's cooking, then you can do the mise en place for the second item on your list. And I don't know how many items you're cooking. Typically, when I do a combination prep, I only cook 1 or 2 items, unless it's, some sort of a protein in the Instant Pot. I typically only cook 1 or 2 items. So while those are cooking, then I get my other vegetable prep done. And then I get my energy balls made, or my yogurt jars, or my smoothie bags, or something like that ready to go. So get the thing that's going to cook and take the longest done first, and then utilize that time. You're not just twiddling your thumbs hanging out. You are actually getting the rest of your prep done during that time. So that is how you are going to prep with efficiency. And it's my favorite thing to talk about when it comes to meal prep. Meal prep is about creating your own convenience, not stressing you out, not making you feel like you are restricted to, these meals that you've prepped ahead of time. And then during the week, you're like, oh, I have to eat the same thing over and over again. That's not what meal prep is about. It's just creating your own convenience. It's making life easier for you throughout the week and giving you options. So when it comes to prepping ahead, it's important that you don't feel like it's such a crazy burden that every single week it feels like this crazy time that you never look forward to and is a super stress, because you won't stick with it. So I want meal prep to feel the most efficient it possibly can for you. So I hope this was helpful in helping you to plan your prep and to prep with efficiency. And like I said, I go into this in way more depth in my meal prep course, but this is a little primer for you. I hope this was helpful for you guys. Be sure to catch me over on Instagram at Healthy Mama Chris. Let me know how this is helping you, and join us in the Healthy Balanced Mama Facebook community as well, where we will continue the discussion about meal prep and more. I'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Healthy Balanced Mama podcast. If you loved it, would you take a screenshot and share it with a friend over on Instagram and tag me in it? It helps me so much to know what you love and are taking away from each episode. If you really loved it, would you hop over to iTunes and give me a star rating and review? Every rating and review helps this podcast be seen and heard by more women who need to hear the message of balance and wellness without deprivation. It's the best free gift you could give me. And as a reminder, the information and opinions on this podcast are meant for education and inspiration only, and are not to be taken as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please consult with a trusted practitioner before making any changes. Have a beautiful day, friend, and I'll see you in the next episode.